Welcome to a special episode of Design Nerds Anonymous. I'm your host, Amanda Schneider. Now, this episode was recorded live at NeoCon 2025, and it was our first live DNA event. And I have to say, out of the 11 different panels and interviews I took part in during NeoCon 2025, this one sparked something different for me. I don't know if it was the energy in the room, or maybe it was the way that Ethan, our Gen Z voice from IA, put words to a feeling that so many of us are living through. You got to hear it for yourself. Let's get into it. We are recording live here from NeoCon 2025. So we have a phenomenal panel today, and I'm very excited to introduce them in just a minute. But before we dive into that, I want to tell you a little bit more about what this whole season of Design Nerds Anonymous represents. Season 8 will be kicking off this fall. This is our most futuristic season yet. If you're a fan of the podcast, you know a lot of what we do on Design Nerds Anonymous is really looking at data that's measuring the now and trying to leverage that data to project where we're headed. This next season is titled Tomorrow's Impact, that's really looking at things like AI, generations, sustainability, and what we all should be paying attention to now and in the future. Without further ado, our first question for our panelists. Tell us your name, what you do or your work in a sentence or two, and if you had to pick one word to describe the future you see coming, what would that be? So Kaelynn, I'm going to start with you.
Yay, I love being first. Hi, everyone. My name is Kaelynn Reid. I am an applied insights strategist and certified design futurist with Kimball International. My work is to connect the dots between data, the future, design, and products. And so when you connect those dots, you create a constellation of being able to really understand what products are necessary for future users. But also part of my work is just looking at the future of design, where the built environment is going. And so the one word that I have is emotional. And I picked that for several reasons. So right now, I think amidst all these conversations that I'm sure you're hearing your business leaders talk about with regard to AI, and a lot of those conversations have to do with efficiency, productivity, output, right? So these are the words that we're hearing. But I think that I'm seeing a counter trend emerge in this space around just the sacredness of being human. It's really illuminating the obvious vacuum that AI has. AI cannot touch the ability for humans to have emotions and have that contextual depth and storytelling and that richness of personal experience. I say emotional because there's so many things going on right now with regard to, we're looking at sensory design and neuroaesthetics that are all underlining and underpinning the importance of the emotional state. Several years ago, what may have been viewed as a hindrance, your emotional state when you come to work, and it's really viewed as like a deterrent to your work. But essentially now we're really seeing that there's a shift happening with respect for your emotional state. There's respect to bringing your entire authentic self, not just to work, but in the places that we inhabit day in and day out. So my word is emotional.
We had an episode that was about the future of work is really tied to the integration of HR, IT, and workplace design. That was a big topic, the emotions, that it doesn't matter how great the workplace is if people aren't showing up at all, and maybe that's about emotion. And quick plug for your podcast, just because podcasts love other podcasters, so tell us about your podcast in case anyone's interested.
Sure. So I actually host a podcast called Alternative Design, and the point of alternative design is to basically create that contextual creativity by connecting the dots that perhaps don't seem like they should be connected on the surface. Some of our episodes in previous seasons past have been on Burning Man and the iterative approach that's necessary to build and tear down a city in 2 weeks, and what design can take from that. That's everyone's favorite episode, yeah. But really just looking outside of the industry, much like DNA does, to look for sources and for clues that can give us ideas on how our industry and how the built environment should change. If you're interested, it is on iTunes, it's on Spotify, it's on kimballинternational.com/insights. So
wherever you get your podcast.
Yeah, wherever you get your podcasts.
Awesome. All right, our first word is emotional. Cindy, you're up next.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. I'm Cindy Kaufman. I am Vice President of Marketing for Mannington Commercial, and it's great to be here. That's a tough act to follow, though. Thanks a lot, Kaelynn. Appreciate that. My word that I selected for us to focus on, or at least from my perspective, is human-centric. I think I also represent the older generation here on this panel. And the older I get, the more experiences I've accumulated, the places I've worked. I have not only been in our industry, I have been in the sports industry, live events, became an interior designer middle way through my career, and then pivoted to this industry. To me, what's really been interesting is to really understand the human element at the core of everything. And I talk about this a lot from all of my past experiences, that experiential marketing, specifically because I am in marketing, but just delivering an experience that sort of includes thinking about the humanity and all of us that occupy these spaces and what we're going through, what everyone is experiencing, not just when they're interacting with your brand or your company or your space or your showroom or whatever, but how they're interacting with the people that are in that space and what human beings all bring to the forefront. It's really important. It's a lot of what you talked about, emotion. There's a lot of empathy involved. It's understanding the human-centric needs of all of us in these spaces. And I love that we're having conversations like this now, because when I was in my 20s, where Gen Z is now, we weren't having conversations like that. Nobody cared about my humanity. And that's really important now, and I love that this is part of the conversation. My word is human-centric.
I love it. Emotional, human-centric. And I should also clarify, we are the resident Gen Xers up here, Cindy and I. So,
Holler.
yeah, holla. We're always the ones forgotten. Okay, we got a lot of people raising the roof. That really tells us something about your generation if you're doing that. But I think that is a perfect segue to Ethan here.
Yeah, to the resident Gen Zer. So hi,
Gen
everyone.
Zer.
My name is Ethan Barbour. I'm a designer at IA Interior Architects. I've been there for a few years now. Amanda and I have a great, rich history talking about generational differences, what brings us together, communication styles, et cetera, which is why I'm up here today to shed some light on not only Gen Z, but Gen Alpha, the next wave of people that are hopefully coming into our industry and into our workforce soon by 2030. So my background, not only am I a designer, I also run sustainability for IA Chicago office. I'm on their Design for Belonging group. I'm one of the founding members there, which is aimed around establishing best practices to make design more inclusive for everyday people. So how to best perfect our designs to make them more inclusive. And then I'm also on the DIFA board for Chicago, which is Design Industry Foundations Fighting AIDS. A quick plug for them. They're a really amazing organization that's been benefiting our industry specifically for a very long time, and the help for fighting HIV and AIDS. But moving on to my word, which is exigency, which I did put through Google Translate and make sure I got the definition absolutely correct for this. But exigency is similar to a boiling point. So it's thinking about a time or a period of time that requires quick and decisive action. I think this describes not only our current workforce, but also the geopolitics of our time with the introduction of AI, with the boiling point of sustainability. We're entering a period of time where not only in our businesses and our day-to-day life as designers, but our leaders have to make very quick and decisive action that is going to affect us for generations to come. So both a nod to the sustainability and to the human-centric side of things. We want to keep emotion and humans central to this.
I love it. And I had to look up that word. So if anyone else did, you're not alone here. But as we look at these words together, this is why I love this one word exercise. Our goal with this podcast is definitely talking to our industry, but that this also gives you tools to talk to the world. ThinkLab is doing a lot of research with end users, and one of the things that we're hearing quite frequently is you all have an industry lingo that sometimes the decision makers for the built environment have to take time translating. So that is something we've talked about as a panel, to just make sure that we're translating everything that we're talking about, not only to those responsible for designing and creating the built environment, but to become a tool that you all can talk to your clients about. So as we think about these words, human-centered, emotional, let's see if I say this right, exigency.
Exigency.
We're going to use his audio for that one. But as we think about these three words coming together, what does this tell us about where we're at this moment in time? Whoever wants to jump in.
That's a loaded question. It tells us a lot of things about where we are in time. I think what we're all aware of is that everything is changing. And the thing that's interesting is I think everything was changing before COVID, but COVID just became like this talking point now, that everything changed after COVID. But it's no secret that workplace is in turmoil. And as we are thinking about how to understand how people want to exist in space, from a human-centric point of view, from an emotional point of view, we are in all of these conversations to figure out how do we solve this issue. And I have come to this place where I don't think there's a solution. Like, we're not just waiting to find it. It's going to evolve like everything does over time. But understanding how we all fit into this and looking at different elements, not just the commercial real estate element. What are the needs? What are the requirements? What do the human beings need in those spaces? Those are the conversations that we're having now that I don't think we were having 10, 15 years ago.
Just to add on to that, we talk about the human centricity needing to be at the real center of these quick decisions that we're being faced with right now. If we go back to the AI conversation and we look at what our society is leveraging to get work done and to facilitate some of these conversations, right? I mean, how many of us have leveraged AI to answer an email or to, hey, what's the best way that I can possibly do this? What I want to highlight, though, and potentially challenge us with is that right now there are early studies around AI that are actually showing that there's a compromise on collective creativity and really diversity of thought when leveraging AI. Early studies are showing that it hinders our ability to actually complete the task that we're asking AI to help us with. So it's kind of like building the muscle. If you don't use it, you lose it. So as we talk about what this means for our industry, we find ourselves at this pivotal moment. Let's be extremely cautious and careful about how we're leveraging this tool so that we can make sure that inclusion and belonging and human centricity and the things that make humans sacred can truly be at the center of the conversation. We are already realizing that this tool, this amazing, immense, great tool that we have to think out of the box and absolutely come up with novel ideas, has a bit of a double-sided coin to it, right? It has a bit of a flip to it.
Can I talk about AI for a hot second?
Let's do it.
So I have a love-hate relationship with AI. I love it.
You're probably not alone.
Yeah,
because obviously it makes our lives easier and things like that. But I also hate it. And again, I'm going to speak as the Gen Xer here, but I have always been very proud of my writing abilities, my critical thinking abilities, my abilities to analyze a situation and to come up with solutions and creativity and a deep understanding of whatever I'm facing. And I feel like AI is erasing that in a way. Mm-hmm. And the more I think about people not being able to think critically or to get to that place on their own, that makes me nervous and a little scared.
Yeah. And I think that you're not alone, and there is a good reason to have maybe a cautious optimism, or you can change that up in some way. But Ethan, I would love to hear your Gen Z perspective on that.
Yeah, I, as a Gen Zer, would actually echo that wholeheartedly. So I don't use AI in my personal life for that same reason, is that there's a phrase that I heard kind of online as AI was coming up, to not outsource your humanity. So when it comes to writing emails, having conversations, not letting a computer do that for you, making sure that we're holding sacred the things that do make us human. And that, I think, rings true for my generation. I am on the older side of Gen Z. I believe the oldest. I was born in 99, so I think there's 1 year older than me. But there are a lot of people in my generation and also in Gen Alpha who do echo those similar opinions online, especially when it comes to the creative arts and design. People do not like the idea of a computer creating those visuals, creating the art that we see, because humans make art. Art is made by humans. That cannot be taken away from us.
Amen.
And that's like such a very true stopping point for a lot of people in my generation. What does change, though, especially when you come to generational differences, Gen Alpha is growing up at a time very similarly to Gen Z. So if Gen Alpha is very young at this point. I think the oldest is about 9 or 10 years old. They're born between 2010 and 2024, 2025. So the oldest of them would be about 10 years old, like I said, and they're growing up in a similar way that Gen Z did, where we grew up with the internet. I never knew a world without the internet. My earliest memories are very early stages of the internet, but it was unregulated at that point. My parents didn't know what it could do. Lawmakers didn't really know what it was capable of. So I was able to get away with a lot. And what I hope that Gen Alphas will not be able to get away with as much as we did when it comes to AI, but they're never going to know a world without it. So we have to think about how we're teaching them to use AI as a tool and not as a replacement for creativity.
Ethan, did you see recently there was like a thing on LinkedIn that everybody did where you plugged into your AI platform of choice, what do you believe about me? And you ask your AI what it thinks you are. And I saw, 6 or 7 people posted on LinkedIn. I don't know if the rest of you guys saw it. It was really, you might have participated.
I did see, yeah.
I read all of the people that I kept seeing do this little exercise, and every response was pretty much the same. The words were a little different, but they all said the same thing.
But also very flattering.
Very flattering.
And this is one thing, anybody who's used AI, it's like you give it something and say, how about this? And they're like, that is a fantastic idea. I want to be like,
you're so smart, you're so empathetic.
Yeah,
and it said that about everyone, and I was like, that's a bunch of bullshit. So,
Thank you for being the first today to say bullshit
you knew it
on
was
my
going to
podcast.
happen.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
So I think there are definitely some negatives to AI, but there are also some positives. And I know Kaelynn is our residential pot stirrer sometimes. Would you be my pot stirrer today and say, how do we look at the flip side of this?
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to studies. In terms of the research that we have, it's of course limited, right? We're in this journey about 2 years, right? So there's no long-term studies on this necessarily out right at the moment, but there's a couple things that we can point to. The good news about AI is that it does, in fact, increase personal creativity. Right? So it is actually going to, when you have studies that are showing 2 different participant groups and the one group doing the creative writing prompt gets to use AI versus the group that does not, the group with AI they are coming out with better, more novel concepts, right? So there is a positive side here, particularly when we think about the really big monster challenges, right, that we as a society are facing, right? You look at climate change, you look at some of these, I think they're called wicked problems, right, that are like these really large solvable issues. And so there is an opportunity, I think, to leverage AI for some of these wicked problems and expand human thinking. It does a great job at getting you through creative block or writer's block, right? So just having the options and being able to iterate. But again, I echo the sentiments of the fellow panel mates here that I think there's a bit of a flip side. And so the studies are showing that while yes, it is increasing personal creativity, it comes at the cost of collective diversity of ideas. Because what you just said about the answers starting to all sound the same, that's what this study, actually, it's a recent study by Doshi and Hauser, recently found that among the answers of the AI-assisted participants, those answers increasingly sounded the same. And if that is the case, we as a design industry, as just even professionals, I think can say that there's a huge quality and diversity of thought. There's a huge value add in having diversity of thought and opinion and experience. And so what happens when that essentially becomes erased or washed?
Yeah.
And that diversity of thought is the foundation of the human-centric thing that I was talking about. That's that diversity, that's part of the human requirement, is that there's balance among all these things. I have a question though, Kaelynn, because, and I'm not challenging, I'm just asking, what does more creativity mean?
Oh, I'm so happy you asked because, so I will take 15 seconds to nerd out on this because I'm currently in the middle of trying to research this myself. And I know that we've talked about this before, but I feel like the term creativity is clearly evolving because even as I looked at the scientific literature on what creativity was measured as, that was my question of like, so how are you measuring creativity? Is it just the fact that you got more answers or that it was a truly novelty in the answer that was given? And so there are different methods to sort of grade group creative thought, whether it's termed as like a big C creativity versus a little c. So we talk about how usable is the idea versus how novel the idea is. Much of AI is doing really great on the super novel, really cool ideas, but in terms of is this usable, is this practical, it's really falling flat. But I think if you take us back out of the present for a moment, what was the definition of creativity 100 years ago? 200 years ago. It's like when we think about Da Vinci, what was the definition of creativity in Da Vinci's time? And what was that measured by? Is it truly artistic beauty? Is it that it was touched by a human? Is it that it was a grandiose idea? And so I think when we start to find ourselves challenged by artificial creativity versus human creativity, I myself am very interested, and I'm currently, like I said, I'm just starting to roll up my sleeves on this. I'm hoping to make a CEU sometime soon. But I would love to look at how creativity and that definition and that term has evolved, because I do think that it's changing. And I think people would say the qualifications and the grades of what it constitutes as a creative idea is changing. Yeah, Ethan.
I say what I'd like to challenge there in a sense is that what does support this is that I would say at IA we have this group called AREA, which is AI Research at IA. So this is a whole department that is developed or devoted to researching AI tools for day-to-day usage, and their goal is very similar. They want to increase the creative output of designers, but not necessarily using AI as a tool for creativity, but using AI to free up time in your day to be more creative. Because I think one thing that's really important to remember with AI is that anything AI produces has already been produced before. AI is incapable of having an original thought as of this time, early 2025. Until that is quantum computing way down the road, maybe eventually then they can. But as of right now, using AI to schedule your meetings, check someone's calendar availability, maybe wordsmith an email, help with writing a presentation, those tools can free up more time in your day-to-day life to then ideate more, maybe using AI, and come up with more creative solutions.
Which goes back to the needing to focus focus on those human-centric skills, because if it's the critical thinking that we're punting, or if it's the, you know what I'm saying, if it's the ability to solve problems, or even emotional intelligence that we can talk about in a moment. But those are all very independently human things that we could be really focusing on as we allow AI to automate tasks that are not as cognitively demanding from us or emotionally demanding.
Those are the things that I think Ethan was saying are sacred. Those are sacredly human things. I don't want to give those to AI.
I want to come to Ethan's stat. I asked you guys all to prepare a stat, and they shared their stats in advance with me. And we may say there's things we don't love about AI. That's very fair. But talk about the stat that you shared.
Yeah, so I had... It's like a 3-part stat. But the first of which was the scariest, is that 68% of leaders would not hire someone today without AI skills. So this comes from Microsoft's job reportings of 2024. This is also in partnership with LinkedIn. And then after that, they said that 71% of leaders are more likely to hire a less experienced candidate with AI skills than a candidate that has more experience without AI skills. And then the last, which is on the positive side, is that 77% of leaders say early in career talent will get greater responsibility due to the leverage of AI than they would have otherwise. So I think it tells a lot about not only our current job market, but what the expectation is of future generations. AI is not going anywhere. I think we can all recognize that. There are a lot of benefits to using these tools, but that's exactly what it is another tool in your tool chest. It's a tool, not a solution. And I think that's how we have to approach it, both within our workplace and within our individual lives.
Let me close this AI portion here with just a couple of little stats to give you perspective of where our industry is. We did a survey at ThinkLab beginning of 2024, and at that time, 6% of our industry was using AI. Fast forward to about 7 months later, we closed a second survey. 33% of our industry was using AI then, with another third expecting to in the near future. Now, we have a current open survey that's going to measure our next stopping point on that train, but you can see the explosion of this AI use. And we had the privilege of hosting a group just Saturday, right before NeoCon here, a group that was really having a roundtable around AI and what we need to be thinking about and learning about and knowing as we think specifically about our industry and the built environment. And I think one of the most shocking things about that were how many companies are still looking at AI kind of from the ground up, meaning each individual is doing their own thing. They're not necessarily sharing knowledge sharing across individuals, experimenting with these tools to make sure that translates. There was only one company out of about 24 people, 24 companies represented, that kind of had a top-down strategy or even a policy in place. So lots to think about there for anyone in our industry and outside of our industry. But we've hit a little bit on generations, a lot on AI. Cindy, I know you came with a stat about sustainability. Maybe you'd like to share your stat with us.
I did. I'm going to read it too, so I don't mess it up. Because when we were preparing for this, we were talking about a lot of things, AI and sustainability. And I want to, full disclosure, I am not our sustainability leader at Mannington Commercial. Shane Totten holds that space. But I have come to a place right now where I actually talk about this every single day, which I think he would be probably pretty glad to hear. But this really floored me, and it scares me a little bit. But so, according to a recent analysis, the 6th mass extinction of wildlife on Earth is accelerating. More than 500 species of land animals are on the brink of extinction and are likely to be lost within 20 years. The same number were lost over the entire last century. So that to me is terrifying. Scientists say that without human destruction of nature, the rate of loss would have taken thousands of years. So to me, there's a lot of reasons that I care about that. I happen to be an animal lover, but I also believe in beauty of nature and that the natural world is, we are part of the natural world. Obviously, I think we're probably all familiar with biophilic design. It's really important to me to focus on what are the choices that we're making as an industry, and what are the choices that we're making as an industry having as an impact on our planet? So it's not a marketing story. It's not just a sustainability narrative. These are real things that are actually happening. We are so carelessly treating our natural resources and our planet as if they're all somehow renewable. And that stat really terrified me. So we have a responsibility. In particular, this industry has a distinct responsibility in this area. And if we're not paying attention, and even thinking of it in terms, If Shane were here, he would talk about chemicals of concern and other things that I'm not going to talk about. But thinking about extinction of animals, that's the impact that's not that far afield from understanding what we're doing in the built environment.
Puts it in perspective. And I think for any interior designers in the audience, another fun Think Lab stat, fun fact, is that the average interior designer has around 40 times the recommendation power as the average American consumer has buying power. When you think about the interior design giants of design, that's like the top 200 firms. Think of it like the Fortune 500, except there's only 200 and they do interior design work. That number is 140 times on average the recommendation power as the average American consumer has buying power. So simply put, the choices our industry is making matter. Metropolis has another stat that talks about the carbon emissions. I think that the interior design industry is responsible or will be responsible for 10% of the world's carbon emissions by 2050. It's big decisions, and this matters. Ethan, I want to come to you here because, again, we are talking not only to our industry, but to people making decisions for the built environment. Like, what do you have to add to this from a design firm perspective, from a generational perspective, just in terms of what we should be encouraging the world to think about?
Yeah, it's a big topic that I think a lot of designers are grappling with right now. To be transparent in the industry, there's a lot of unknowns in how to even approach a topic that's as big as this. A lot of those big firms, those top 200 firms, have signed the AIA 2030 pledge, which is a really great first step, but that's only 5 years away. And I think one of the biggest challenges right now in the industry for designers is simply collecting the amount of data that is required to report and even understand how large our carbon footprint is. And you think of each individual material that goes onto a project, it's not just one spec for carpet, it's the backing, it's the glue, all of that has some sort of carbon footprint, the labor to install it, where it's coming from, where it's being shipped from. The amount of data that's needed to process that is immense, and it's something that there are a lot of different parties in the industry that are trying to tackle right now. What's front of mind, not only is it something that's put onto the responsibility of designers most of the time, but it's also thinking about it from billable hours. We can't be naive here and ignore the business side of it, is that to survive in our industry, you do have to make money. And to make money, you have to be profitable from your billing standpoint. And to do that, you need a lot of time to record all of those things. So that's something that we have teams in IA that are working on this. Like, I'm on one team that's developing the infrastructure to report this. It's a big undertaking, and I know a lot of other design firms are doing the same thing. But what we're trying to start with, like today, I had just given a presentation earlier this year to our designers on how to just reframe thinking about pulling material palettes, thinking about it in lease terms. If your tenant is a 10-year lease, don't specify something that's going to fall apart in 5 years. Thinking about it from a trend standpoint, don't specify the trendiest furniture piece or trendiest material out there. Specify something that you know is going to last the full length of the project. And then lastly, our sample ordering process and how we present these ideas to clients, taking even steps to reduce the amount of packages that you're getting in. We're very lucky to be here in Chicago, and so I can come to the market if I want to see something, or go over to design days if I want to see something. So really trying to take what actions we can now that affect our projects today, even though we know that there are these larger questions that the industry as a whole is grappling with.
Kaelynn, anything to add there?
I think to me that highlights some of the sense of hope that I have around data and AI and being able to leverage that for good. When you require that much data and that much information to be able to aggregate and understand the impacts of that is one of the hopes that I have that in the next 3 to 5 years, that with the help of things like blockchain and AI and being able to aggregate that data, having that at your fingertips is going to be a tremendous superpower that will only magnify that 140% of influential power that our industry has. And so I am looking forward to that, because I do think that will help decision making, and it will help hopefully make it feel less like a big hairy monster to have to solve, right? So I think that makes me feel very hopeful.
Anything to add?
I agree wholeheartedly. I'm super excited about the potential that AI has to tackle that solution with us. I think it's also something that the entire industry as a whole is going to have to look at. Right now, there's so many ways of reporting carbon emissions, the chemicals that go into things, so many different certifications, product labels that, like I said, I know multiple parties are attempting to decipher a way of how to even present that information to designers. I think it's something it's also integral to designers' education at this point. I know sustainability courses are incredibly important. I took them when I was in college. I know a lot of other designers do as well as just coming together as an industry and sharing resources. I know For example, Gensler has a really great kind of way that they're tackling the materiality of things. They've made that public so that everyone can use it. And I think that's a good example for everyone else to follow, is that this is a communal effort, a humanitarian problem, not just a design industry problem, and that we have to tackle this together.
It's only going to be solved with collaboration.
Exactly.
I represent a manufacturer, and it's so different on our side of the table than it is from the design side. Being collaborative with our competitors is challenging, let's just say. But that's the only way it's going to be solved. It's industry-wide, and there is no single solution. It has to be collective solutions. So I think you're absolutely right.
I think that's true in the sustainability realm. It was very loud and clear in our AI workshop that the way forward is really this cooperation, or not competition, but cooperation. I want to push us to the future a little bit more. And I want to challenge each of you to fast forward to 2040. I think we've done a great job with some stats, about maybe alarming stats about where we are today, and that have given us a lot to think about around sustainability, around AI, around generations in the workplace. But I want to fast forward a bit and think about what is one radical possibility that you might imagine for the future. One that might feel maybe a little bit wild now, but could actually happen. Who wants to start this one? Everyone's avoiding eye contact. That's a good question then.
If I could whistle, I would. I had a thought about something. I don't know that I would call this radical, but it was I'm just going to say it. I was thinking a lot about workplace in particular, and thinking about how, in my own personal experience in my recent career years, the workplaces that I've been have been wildly different from one another, but also shared some alarming similarities. We all know that the open office environment is a big failure. People crave territory. They want their own safe space. Biophilic design also tells us people need a space of refuge, blah, 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 all that stuff. And then I look at the rise of co-working, and the rise and then the crash, and maybe the rise again of co-working. And I started to think about, when I think about my work modalities, the way I work personally, my modalities, which I started to figure this out before COVID, so we talked about this a little while earlier, I have 3 typical modalities. Number 1 is I'm in a meeting with colleagues. So that's number 1. Number 2 is I'm heads down and I need to be alone in a place that's quiet. And number 3 is, unless I'm traveling, so I guess that would be 4, but if I'm not traveling, being on the phone or on a Teams meeting, but prior to COVID, on the phone, on a conference call. So those were the 3 basic, like, day-to-day modalities without traveling. And what my needs were at different times of the day. I have a different energy frequency than all of my colleagues. I'm energetic in the morning, and I wake up and I go to the gym, and then in the afternoon I'm like, just leave me alone, I need a nap. So just thinking about, everybody has their own version of that. And everybody has their modalities, everybody has their energy frequency, everybody is introverted or extroverted or whatever they are. So how can a workplace work for all those people? So I started to think, what if there's somehow this merging of a co-working environment and the thought of a university campus? Think about where you went to school. If you went to a university on a proper campus, and there were buildings that were dedicated typically to some sort of field of study, and then there were some classrooms, but that every year you would go into that same building multiple times a year, and you would go to a different class with a different instructor. Typically at my college, there would be like a different layout. The classroom would be reorganized or something like that. And then if you had a different class, you would go somewhere else and do something else. And then there were people at the cafeteria and people at the library. And there was just this sort of fluidity that flowed with what the modality was. Why are we together? Are we in a class? Are we studying at the library? Are we shooting the shit at the cafeteria? So what if that's, like, why don't we do that as adults? It works in the university setting, and there's constant change. That's the thing. It's like the university is this sort of space that contains things that are constantly in motion and constantly changing, but you're still in the same space. Could there be a place that's like a co-working version of that, where you're like, for the next 6 months, we're working on this project. We're going to do it in this space, and we're going to keep coming and going out of here. But then this afternoon, I've got 6 conference calls, so I'm going to go home, and I'm going to be in the quiet of my own house. I don't know if that's radical.
Very interesting. And even when the first rise of co-working, there was a great study that was done by the GCUC, JUCI is what they call it, Global Co-working Conference is what it stands for. And what they were looking at is in co-working, what do people pay for? If you think about this was back in 2014 timeframe where, work is not something you pay for, or an office is not something you pay for as an average user. You just get a key card, you walk in. So they wanted to know what was selling out first and what was selling out the highest rates. Can anybody guess what it was?
Coffee.
Private offices was the space, right? Because people want their little cave and then they want to be able to join. So I feel like that was like a message way back then, if we could rewind time, that was good. So what about Ethan, Kaelynn? Any thoughts on your radical future?
I think to address the elephant in the room, it's such a difficult thing to grapple with. I think with just everything that's going on in the world right now between the introduction of AI, how that's affecting industry, the large, I can't remember the word you used for it, but the large questions of sustainability, where climate change is going, how generations will be affected by this, obviously makes it hard to predict the future. So I forgot my crystal ball today, unfortunately. But what I think,
what in Atlanta.
I truly think is going to happen from the perspective of the built environment is that our clientele is going to be radically different today than what it is 40 years from now. I think entire industries will develop and cease to exist within the next 2 decades. Yeah, 2 decades. Yeah, I'm doing math. There's so many jobs right now that are really about data processing, analyzing data. We think about consulting, we think about economics in that way. All of those jobs, not all of them, but a large portion of them could be changed, erased, rewritten by AI and by the introduction of AI. And so I think we're going to see new industries emerge about management of AI, about implementation of AI in sectors that we haven't yet thought about using it for. I also think that it's going to greatly affect our medicine studies. I think that we're going to see a vastly different biological era 20 years from now than we will have now, just with the ability to study medications so quickly with the use of AI. But that also means that a lot of industries we see today are not going to be present. How does our industry as the designers and architects, how do we adapt to stay relevant with, maybe we're not doing legal offices anymore, we're doing managerial offices for legal AI, vastly different world that we're going to be living in 20 years from now.
Absolutely, said. And we forgot our crystal balls, but luckily we brought a futurist with us. So I know she's excited for this question.
Man.
Really, as we look forward, what is one radical prediction you have?
So I, as a foresight professional, a lot of what my job is building what's called scenarios of the future. And so a lot of it is taking a lot of what Amanda does in terms of looking at data and research and evidence-based studies that we have today and really just projecting into the future and looking at sort of the intersection of multiple trends and multiple uncertainties. Uncertainties is what you can't possibly know about the future. It's like what happens about these wicked problems and challenges that we have to solve for. So I created a mini scenario that I think will actually scaffold and bring to life Cindy's forecast a little bit.
So when things tie together.
I know, it's so fun. So I'll read it for you. By 2040, AI has turned the built environment into a living, dynamic ecosystem of experiences that can adapt and change to users' needs and preferences in real time. Operating off of things like your body data from your Oura Ring, from your Fitbit, your Apple Watch, taking into mind your chronotype, how you work, whether you're an early riser or a late night worker, or your emotional state is all part of the consideration and how the built environment adapts to you in real time. Imagine if a lounge chair could change the seat firmness and adjust things like the ambient light and the sound cues simply based on your stress state in a given moment. Or if an entire office could update overnight like your iPhone iOS update does, where adjusting the layout, the arrangement of a space based on predictive occupancy data, based on team needs or a project need for a given month. Designers may increasingly be the ones choreographing possibilities versus building artifacts. I'll say that again. Designers may increasingly be the ones choreographing possibilities versus building an artifact.
That's amazing.
You're the one pushing the domino chain reaction instead of controlling the outcome. We would enable spaces to change, to be generative, and to be co-designed by the people using it. That's 2040.
Okay, mic drop. I love that. I think it's so fascinating, and I love that it gets to how people can think about maybe the built environment differently. But also, my passion is process innovation over product innovation. So she probably did that on purpose. But I think it really talks about even some industry shifts and how that could happen here. So we're quickly coming to the end of our time together, and we knew that this would go fast. Before I ask the last question, though, let me see if anyone up here has responses to Kaelynn's future scenario.
You said what was like in my head, which I did without AI, by the way.
Yeah.
But that was amazing. I loved the use of the word choreography there. Mm-hmm. I think that's underrated. I want to dig into that because that's what this is. It's constantly in motion.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Ethan, any other thoughts?
Other than it sounds amazing and I'd love to be there already. No, not necessarily. I think that there's a really interesting, I think we already are, but we will be having over the next 5-10 years a very interesting conversation surrounding AI usage and data privacy. It comes to, say, adapting a built environment to someone's nervous system and regulations that also requires consenting to give over your nervous system and emotion data to large companies. Yes. And I think right now we're still in a period of time. I likened it back to when I was growing up with the internet prior to internet regulation really existing. We're in a period of time before AI regulation existing. And right now, AI is somewhat running rampant with data that we all don't really understand where it comes from, where it got it. And so I'm hopeful and optimistic that we can achieve that future in a regulated and safe way that still protects end users and the next generation just as much as it does the built environment.
And I think a lot of this leads to change. And if anyone listened to our episode 2, this most recent season, my 14-year-old son, Austin, introduced me. Anybody listen to that? It was very cute. My favorite line is, and I love that I get to share my mom with all of you. So if you didn't listen to that, you should totally hear him. But one of the interesting things is he is right on the border of Gen Z and Gen Alpha. And by the time he is in the workplace, 65% of the jobs he will have available to him don't exist yet. So I think that's interesting to think about and really ties to what you were saying, Ethan, about some of the change and how we make it plausible and even the shifts that are going to happen in this industry. But let's land this plane here, because sometimes when we talk about all this change, it makes us uncomfortable, right? Like, change is hard, change might be happening to us. We want to put our audience and our listeners in the driver's seat. So I want to close with a piece of advice that makes me feel maybe a little bit better and less uncomfortable about all this change and makes our audience feel like there's something that they can do about it. So my closing question to each of you is, what is one thing you or our audience today or listening later or even our industry can do differently tomorrow? We're talking about tomorrow's impact, get that there? Can do differently tomorrow to move forward to this future, I think especially the one Kaelynn just painted, which is definitely a better one. What is your advice to our listeners?
I think right now, the task is beginning to think about how our design process would need to change. So if we think about that, the scenario of the future, and again, one of many, friends, the goal of foresight is not to get the future right, but to simply get your brains thinking and changed a little bit as to, wow, could that be a possibility? Because from there, you can create an action roadmap, to Amanda's point, that feels a little less scary and a little less nebulous, right? But if we were to, let's say, agree that, again, noting the ethical concerns that Ethan brought, which is valid, and I omitted just for the sake of having a really fun scenario, but very important. But I would say, as an industry, those that are responsible for the built environment, those that are experiencing the built environment, how can we think about these spaces becoming more dynamic, becoming more responsive, these just-in-time designs? And how does that change a few traditional parts of our design process? When we think about the client relationship, okay, so it's likely that your client relationship is going to extend post-install day. So if it's going to be something where those environments are constantly changing, guess what? You've now created a loyalist client that is going to be your client for a very long time. We think about furniture. We think about the cyclical nature and the specification of furniture, right? Whether it gets specified one time and it's just getting changed out parts that are obsolete or perhaps failing. We think about creating a circular system with furniture and being able to change that out. And so there are things about the fundamental shifts in the way that we've approached design as this static, it's designed and it's good, walk away, let it go kind of experience that I think as we move in the future, it would behoove us to think through how does our design process change to embrace something that's a bit more generative, that is a bit more flexible and fluid.
Iterative.
Yes.
There we go.
Shall I jump in?
Go ahead, Cindy.
I don't know if mine is like one thing to do differently, but mine is more advice on mindset. And that is really to just somehow make friends with change, make friends with uncertainty. There's a Buddhist concept around the illusion of permanence. And I think architecture and design specifically are mired in this illusion of permanence. Ooh. We think of structures, this building that we're in, the products that we specify as permanent fixtures, and yet we know we're going to rip them out. And sustainability is only one tiny piece of the impact of that. If you can understand that illusion of permanence and let go of a dogmatic attachment to that idea and make friends with change, I think that is the way to approach the future.
And I think that's great advice, not only for those in our industry, but those who are making decisions on behalf of these spaces.
I think so.
Good. Ethan.
All right. The piece of advice that I had thought about prior to this, I let slip earlier, which was originally to not outsource your humanity. But I'm going to put a more positive spin on that, and that is to remember what makes your humanity sacred. So I think that there's going to be a lot of decisions in the upcoming future that will require us in our day-to-day jobs about whether or not we use AI, whether we hire someone who's more junior because AI could maybe do that instead. There's going to be a lot of those kind of quick decision-making processes, of course, which led to my word again for today about reaching that kind of boiling point. And I think remembering what makes our humanity sacred is going to help propel us and our businesses and our design practices into the future as seamlessly with so much change happening.
Awesome. Well said. Well said. We started this out with our 3 words: emotional, human-centric, and say it one more time.
Exigency.
Beautiful. It's beautiful when he says it, right? So we hope that we've given you some stats that really help illuminate where we are and why it's so urgent. I'm just going to say urgent because I can say that, but also paint a more positive picture. I want to close you out with some excitement for this season. So again, this whole season is Tomorrow's Impact. We're going to be picking up on a lot of themes that kind of came up. I think this was a phenomenal introduction to it. Some of the titles that we have coming up: how will Gen Alpha shape the world we haven't built yet? We have actually one of the foremost experts in generational research. If you've ever heard of McCrindle, they're out of Australia. They are the ones that have actually named each of the generations. They have some phenomenal research, and it's going to be a great conversation with him. What will work look like when Gen Alpha takes over? How will AI shape healthcare? We've got some brand new research about what is happening and a beautiful Italian accent to deliver it on that episode. What's next for hotels and hospitality spaces? We interview Marriott, who, are you ready for this stat? Building a new hotel every 18 to 36 hours. Does that blow your mind? So we get to listen into what they are thinking about. What kind of homes will Gen Alpha want? We have a brand new study that's out on kind of homes and how that might shape the built environment there. And what does the future of learning tell us about the future of work? So we're going to be talking to some leading research experts in the future of education. So we will be sharing that with all of you, and you'll be hearing more of that. It will actually start launching this fall. But in the meantime, I also want to invite you to go back and listen to Season 7, which was built all around our digital futures. We have some of our sponsors in the room, Pallotti and West. Go ahead and wave back there. You can talk to them. The Mart and NeoCon, of course, were in that space. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and officially close us out. But I'll say I hope everyone listening really leaves here maybe a little bit more inspired about the future. One of my favorite reviews about ThinkLab and DNA, the DNA podcast, was highest insights per minute. We didn't get to edit up here. This was live. You see how the sausage is made. But we hope that you've enjoyed this live conversation, and we hope you feel a sense of pride as it goes live. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you guys so much for joining today. This was really great. If you enjoyed this and you want more live content, let us know what events we should cover next. And maybe we'll show up with a mic. Seriously, we love hearing from you. If you have ideas, feedback, or just want to connect, find me, Amanda Schneider, on LinkedIn. Send me a direct message. I read them all, and your ideas will shape where we take this show next. Design Nerds Anonymous is a proud member of the Surround Podcast Network. Special thanks to the podcast production team, Hannah Vitti, Rachel Senator, and Rob Schulte.